Welcome, warriors. Today's story is about a topic many find difficult to discuss. Or maybe it's that we find it difficult to discuss it without anger and accusations. We are discussing a side of abortion that's not always portrayed. Grab a tissue and listen in as we discuss my guest's reasoning and what she experienced after the fact. Let's rock.
Does your past haunt you? Maybe you're in a storm that feels like it will never end. Are you fighting a battle that's rendering you hopeless? Maybe you feel like you're fighting alone, but your battle was not meant to be a solo endeavor. You were meant to be a warrior among warriors. My name is Heather, and I grew up thinking my battles were nobody's business until I found myself in an abusive marriage and felt cut off from all avenues of help. In this podcast, you will hear warriors' words. They will tell you of their battles, both won and lost, their journeys, and their lessons learned along the way. But we don't stop there. These warriors will share how they have applied those lessons to go from warrior to survivor to thriver. Whether it's an abusive marriage, illness, mental health crisis, or any number of traumas this world dishes out, these warriors will use their words to help you find the beauty in your broken, move beyond your battles, and become the thriver God created you to be. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words.
Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. I am grateful to be able to share Brittany's story with you today. It starts with a question many people ask and continues on a path from which many can benefit. Brittany Poppe is a speaker, podcast host, abortion recovery coach, and proud wife and stay-at-home mom. Brittany has experienced firsthand the pain of choosing abortion as she walked through the doors of an abortion facility at the young age of 17. After seeking help through a Bible study over 10 years later, Brittany felt a calling on her heart to share her story for God's glory. Now she is a public speaker and also hosts the podcast, Does God Forgive Abortion?, which serves as an outlet to bring hope and healing to women all over the nation with past abortions. Brittany resides in Fargo, North Dakota, with her husband, Jonathan, and their 2 children. Before we continue with Brittany's journey, here is another recent review. So powerful. This podcast is so powerful. It's what we need to thrive in life. Thank you for these deep conversations that are inspiring. Thank you so much. I love reading that the idea of these stories are just powerful. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and star ratings help people find the Warrior Words podcast. It only takes a minute of your time and it would help so much. And I'd also like to invite you to come over to my YouTube channel. I do have one for the podcast called Warrior Words, but I also have an art one called Beauty in the Broken. And I chose that name for my channel because I wanted to connect it in a visual way to what we talk about here on the podcast. I create videos that showcase art techniques, and many times they start out as a mess, but then they end up beautiful in some way. So it's my art therapy. Come join me. Just go to YouTube and type in the @ symbol in the search bar, followed by There's Beauty in the Broken. No spaces, and it's There's, Theres. There's Beauty in the Broken. I'll include that in the show notes as well. And please like and subscribe while you're there. Now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. Well, as you heard in the intro, we are blessed to have Brittany Poppe here with us today. And welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Brittany.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's an honor to be able to be on the podcast.
Well, I'm glad that we were able to make it work. So normally, we like to talk about our guests' books or podcasts or what they do at the end of each episode. But today, I think I want to start by asking you to share the name of your podcast and your website right at the beginning, because I think it asks a powerful, possibly triggering, but powerful question. So, can you tell us what the name is, please?
Yeah, so the name of the podcast is called Does God Forgive Abortion?
Yes, very, very powerful. And I think so many women who have been in that situation ask that question.
Mm.
And I think I heard you say a statistic recently about how many women actually are in that situation. Um, what was it? I think it
Yes.
was, go ahead.
Yes, it's 1 in 4. That's the one that I see the most often, but I have even seen some say that it's closer to 1 in 3 women who've
Wow.
had at least one abortion by the age of 45.
Wow. That's, and I don't think a lot of us really think about that or
Mhm.
realize that. So, um, and before we get into Brittany's story, I do have to say that this is not a political discussion.
No,
This is
no.
a personal discussion about healing and faith. And also, you don't have to have had an abortion in order to benefit from this conversation. As Brittany just said, it could be 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women. So chances are you know someone who has
Mhm.
had an abortion, and listening may offer hope to them. You may be able to offer some hope to someone. So,
Mhm.
and with that, so Brittany, would you share with our listeners your story, which I believe begins back in high school? And not that you look much older right now.
Well,
I
thank
feel
you.
I feel old sitting here, but no, I know your story starts back in high school. So could you start at the beginning and share with us your story?
Yeah, yep. So when I was 17 years old, I was a senior in high school at this time. I was in a relationship with a boy that I had been kind of forbidden from dating.
Mm,
And I just, for some reason at this point in my life, I had always been so honest with my parents. And at this point, I just decided not to be. And I continued this relationship and found myself in an unplanned pregnancy. And in the moment that I realized that I was pregnant, I knew that all of the lies that I had been telling for the better part of a year at this point were about to have to come out.
right. Yeah.
My mom was going to have to find out about this because you can't really hide a pregnancy or a baby, at least for
Right.
very long.
Right. Exactly.
And I don't know what had come over me at this point, but I immediately just told myself that I had to find some sort of solution to make this go away. And so at this point, smartphones had kind of just started to become like a thing that people had. And so I
Hmm.
had one and I started Googling, what can I do? And I ended up coming across information about abortion. And I had grown up in a Christian home and I had always said that I was pro-life and that I valued life and that that was something that I would never do or never even think about doing
Right.
um, until I was faced with that as an option.
Mm, yes.
And so um, I didn't know if that was going to be an option for me because I was only 17 and still a minor.
Right.
And
Hmm.
my mom never would have been okay with me doing that. And her finding out was kind of the whole reason why I wanted to make this go away in the
Hmm.
first place. And so I came across there's a facility in my city that I live in that does abortions. And I came across their website and I found out information about something called the judicial bypass. And so, in certain states that require parental notification for abortion, there almost all of them have this law called the judicial bypass that essentially kind of takes away the need for parental notification to have an abortion. So I didn't need parental permission. I just had to sit before a judge and get a signature stating that I was of sound mind to make my own medical decisions. And then I was then legally allowed to have an abortion without having to tell anyone.
I didn't even know such a law existed. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes. So, um, yeah, so once that became an option, that just kind of became my only option. My
Okay.
only thought was this is going to make all my problems go away. I'm going to still be able to go to college. My mom's never going to have to find out about anything. It's going to be fine. We're going to be okay. That's what I told myself. That's what the people at the abortion facility told me. And so I was like, this is going to be fine. And so that's what I did. About a week later, I had my appointment and sat before the judge, had the signature signed off for me, and I went through with the abortion.
I
Yeah.
bet that was a tough decision. I remember speaking with a previous guest, Liz Birkland, and she
Mhm.
shared with us how so many people have been faced with that decision. It's not the easy decision that we sometimes see or see portrayed anyway. And it sounds from what you were saying that it was just such a I guess a pulling within you with your pro-life background and your Christian household, and then what your mother would think. And I can't imagine how difficult that decision actually is to make.
Yeah, I think often, especially now, about that time in my life. And at first, it just, like I said, it had become my only option. I wouldn't entertain the thought of anything else. But I remember that day so clearly. God, I felt like really just trying to nudge me, like, you don't have to do this.
Mm,
I've got a plan for you and this is going to be okay. And that guilt would start to form, but I had just gotten so far into the process. And, once you're in the building, it's so hard to, you know, they have it set up to where you don't feel like you can just leave. You feel like you kind of
okay.
have to go through the whole process before you can walk out the door.
Oh, wow. Okay. So after you made that decision and went through with it, how was everything okay? Like,
No. If I'm being honest, I did have a sense of relief right away
mhm.
because I thought, okay, it's over and I don't have to think about this again. But that was very fleeting. I I was so young. I was only 17. I didn't know anything about what my body was doing in the recovery process. I was in a lot of pain. Um, and I actually thought multiple times that I was having a severe problem post procedure. And when I would call the facility and ask them, they would just kind of, brush me off and try to get me off the phone. And
Oh,
I just felt really alone. And again, the gravity of what I had done, given my background, just really brought that guilt and shame kind of to the forefront.
mhm.
And my mom did end up still finding out about my relationship. And I then did tell her about the abortion, which devastated her. But we know that what's done in darkness always comes to light. And so I
Right.
was really naive to think that my life would just be okay.
Yeah, well, I think that's something that happens, I think, to a lot of us, and not just in this situation of an unplanned pregnancy or an abortion. I think, you know, like you said, what happens in darkness comes to the light, and that can be true of multiple situations.
Mhm.
And yeah, the people we try to hide it from the most usually end up finding out one way or
Yes.
another. So,
Mhm.
so if you don't mind my asking, then how did that go with your mom?
Yeah, so she never once had any anger towards me, and that's what I
Oh,
had thought she would have. But she was just very devastated and hurt that she was not able to help me in that
mm,
situation. That law had taken away her parental rights. And so she was just so sad and hurt that I had gone through something like that and she couldn't be there. And like, she knew that that never would have happened had she known about the pregnancy. And she also grieved the loss of her grandchild too. And so she responded in a way that she wanted to help me, but I think she just was like, I have no idea. I'd never prepared for this as a parent because I never would have thought my daughter would do this.
yeah, I think you bring up some really good points there. That one, we don't think about everybody else who grieves as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Grandparents grieve, and sometimes the fathers grieve
Hmm.
too, and it's just devastation. I think that was the word you used, and I think that's a good word. And I'm glad to hear that anger was not the word
Yeah.
that you experienced. That
Hmm.
you did experience some, I guess, some love from your mother, and that it was
Hmm.
hurt as opposed to lashing out. And so
Hmm.
that was
Yes.
so okay. So I guess moving forward then, how did you we like to talk about survival. So this is not really like you just survive an incident. This is a more of a long-term. You mentioned some physical symptoms. Were there any emotional symptoms? Were there any other ramifications that you had to survive over the course of time?
Yeah. So I did end up still going to college, and in that time, I don't think I realized how much my abortion was affecting me mentally. But looking back on it, I can now see how I had just taken a complete 180 in who I was.
Mm,
I experienced a lot of anger. I had a very bad temper for a while, and I didn't really respect myself and just kind of really didn't, my faith was just not important to me either. And just kind of like I'd go through all of these things and just have to try to dig myself out of these holes that I had gotten myself into. I don't know if this is really like the right term, but it was kind of like I was unhinged for a lot of years, just like
yeah.
not really having that ground, that anchor to hold on to.
No, I think that's a good word. Given
Yeah.
given what you're describing, not having that anchor unhinged is perfect. You don't have that grounding anymore
Hmm.
that you had. So how did you find your way back to that? Because you've mentioned God a couple times. So
Yes.
how did you find your way back to that anchor?
So when I was about 25, I think I had been given the book The Circle Maker, and it's a really great book. It's all about prayer and how to really kind of expand your prayer life. And I was at this entire time I would have called myself a Christian, but I wasn't walking in that walk. And
Okay,
I desired to, but almost didn't feel like I was allowed to because of what I had done. It was this
right.
weird like battle I had going on in my mind, but I was gifted this book and I read it and I started to implement those pieces into my prayer life. And I started praying circles over my life and my future career and certain things that I had going on. And I saw God working in my life. And so I started to dedicate my life back to him and I started walking in that walk, in that Christian walk. And I wasn't perfect, nor am I now, but
No, we never will be, right?
exactly. But I got into church and I just really just found so much joy in it. But I always had this feeling like I was a fraud because I wasn't open about my story. Very few people knew that I had had an abortion. And due to some false teachings that I had heard in my past, I thought that abortion was one of those sins that wasn't forgivable. And I would hear people say that it was, but then I would think back to certain things that I had heard before and think, well, it can't be though. I'm, I don't know. There must be this secret formula or something that I have to do to try to win God's favor back. And I
Mm,
don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that. And so after a few years of doing that, things in my life happened. I got married. Shortly after we got married, we actually found out we were expecting our first child. And there was a lot of joy with that, but there was also a lot of fear because I was afraid that something was going to happen either to my child or to myself during birth. And I actually was correct in that. So a
mm,
few hours after my daughter was born, I began to have a postpartum hemorrhage. And that was so terrifying. And I just remember thinking that that was the punishment that I had been waiting all these years for, and that I wasn't going to get to live to take my baby home. And thankfully, I'm here today. So
you are, yay.
God saw me through that. But that just kind of sent me into this deep depression for many months because I started to hear the lies from the enemy telling me that I should have just died that day, or I just deserved to die and my daughter deserved a better mother. And
Mm,
there's so much more I could say and so much more that kind of transpired, but God never left me in that time.
no.
And after I had my son, I knew a couple years later, I knew that I couldn't go through that dark time postpartum again because that was not healthy for my family, for my children. Just, I had to get some help. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who I knew had had an abortion. She was kind of like a mentor to me when I was younger.
Mhm.
And in God's timing, they were having a Forgiven and Set Free Bible study literally the following week. It's a post
Mm,
abortion Bible study. And so she invited me to join, and that is how I found my healing. That was just over 2 years ago, and I was in my Bible more than I had ever been and learned God's true character. I learned that abortion is absolutely forgivable because there is no sin that is unforgivable that we can do. And it's just been, yeah, it's just been, I'm so thankful that I had someone to go to point
Yeah.
me into the direction of healing.
Yeah. I'm grateful for her too, because, you were, oh, I just kicked my own table. Um, you were saying that all that fear that you felt with your first pregnancy, with your daughter, um, and it seems like it was replaced with grace.
Hmm. Yes.
And you found grace, you found forgiveness, and you found the love of God, and all wonderful things, and like smiling like a chipmunk over
Yes.
it. So, okay, so now you've learned these lessons about what you've experienced and what you thought versus what God actually wanted for you. And so now what do you do with all of this newfound grace and forgiveness and just more peace, I guess?
Yeah. So during that Bible study, three women led that Bible study. And so one of the women was one that I had known and that invited me to come. And then I met another woman. And one day, a few weeks into it, we were leaving and she looked at me and she said, "You know what? You're going to come speak with me one day." And out of nowhere, I was just like, I would like that. And I just kind of was like, what did I just say? And she goes, really? We're not supposed to talk about it during the study, but after this is over, we're going to go have coffee. And I was like, okay. So we did. The week after the study concluded, I got a text from her. Would you like to meet for coffee this day, this time? And so we met, and she invited me to speak with a panel of women that she leads. And God just had like lit this fire inside of me. After that Bible study was over, I just felt like this can't be it. I I've been healed. Now I have to do something with this. I can't just, sit in this and not share this with other people. And so I started speaking with that panel of women and just getting to see how the audience would react every time we spoke. There are people that are led to healing from us going out and sharing our stories. And during this time, God had started to kind of really plant the seed in my mind that I should start a podcast. And I had always wanted to start a podcast, but I had never really thought of what I would talk about. I just like, who wants to hear what I have to say kind of a thing. But then I heard God tell me, you are going to talk about this. And while I wish I could talk about something else, I don't always love that this is a part of my story, but I love getting to share with people what God has done with it, because
Right.
it's true. In Romans 8:28, we hear, for God works all things together for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And I never would have thought something like this in my life could have been worked for good, but that's what he's done. And so, yeah, now I have the podcast, and I get to help encourage other women who are just kind of struggling in those chains of shame and guilt, break free from them.
Oh, what a blessing. What a blessing. Yeah, I do understand that, sometimes we don't want to talk about our
Yeah.
past, and we don't want to talk about what we've been through or what we've done, um but I think it's so helpful to others to hear
Mhm.
that not only have we walked the path that they walked, but we survived the path that they're on. Um, and there is just freedom, such freedom in the grace and forgiveness that we receive, when we kind of follow the plan that we're supposed to
Yes.
to follow, when we say yes, when you were told to start a podcast. I believe the Holy Spirit told me to start a podcast, and I know we share the same podcast coach who was also told the same thing.
Yes.
um, and it's funny to me because podcasts weren't a thing when the Bible was written. you
Yeah.
know and and I think about it, it's like, well, why does God care whether we start podcasts? Why does he care? And I sat in church one day, and I heard, my ways are above your ways, and my thoughts are
Mm,
so far above your thoughts. And I thought, okay, God, I hear you. I hear you.
yes.
I don't have to know why you're supposed to have yours, or I'm supposed to have mine, or Steph's supposed to have hers, but he has a plan, and he had a plan for you. And he took what you walked through, and he's making something new out of it. So
Mhm.
I think it's absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you.
So so do you have any warrior words that you would like to share with our listeners, to encourage someone who may be walking this journey, somebody who knows somebody who's afraid? Um,
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that there is not a single one of us that is exempt from the redemptive gift that God gave us through Jesus. And while we may not necessarily be deserving of what he has given us, he gave it to us. And so we are not exempt from being able to come to him and lay it down at his feet and accept that gift.
mhm.
And there's nothing anyone has ever done that can't be redeemed through Jesus. And so if that's you listening, you know, just I know just hearing it doesn't heal you, but Jesus can heal you, and you just have to go to him, and not just once, but you just have to just go and lay it down and make a commitment to trusting him with your pain, because he can take it and make it new. And if you're somebody who knows somebody that's walking through this, just being able to be an encouragement to them and understand that this is a healing process, and it's so hard to really just kind of release and surrender. But just being a support and knowing that there's resources out there that can help this person, maybe now isn't the right time for them, but just having those available and being there when they're ready is just what's going to be important and what's going to help them.
Perfect. Thank you. And you happen to have a couple of those resources. So can you share with everyone where they can find you and where they can find your podcast? And I do believe you have a free gift on your website that they can take advantage of also.
Yeah, yep, I do. So the podcast again is called Does God Forgive Abortion? And it's all on all major podcasting platforms. So you can search Apple, Spotify, and listen there. And then my website is brittanypoppe.com. You can also type in doesgodforgiveabortion.com and you'll get there. So both of those work. But I have a free gift on my website. It's called the Permission to Grieve devotional. It's just a quick few page PDF that contains a devotional entry to help you accept God's permission to grieve. Because I don't think I said this earlier, but what women go through after an abortion is a grieving process. So even though it's different from other types of pregnancy loss, it's still a pregnancy loss. It's still something that you need to grieve. And God has given you permission to do that. And so you can find that on my website, or you can go to brittanypoppe.com/freebie, and you can just download that for free.
Wonderful. Yes. And that's so important that we do have permission to grieve. And I think so many people need to hear that. So thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. So, but I also appreciate you coming on and giving us your time today and sharing your story, which, you know, like you said, has its pluses and minuses in that it's hard to share, but it is so helpful to others. And you saying yes to that invitation is such a blessing. So thank you for being a blessing to my listeners as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for having me on.
The topic of abortion is a difficult one. So is the decision to have one, as well as the ramifications that come after it. In Brittany's case, her situation began with deception. She found herself lying and hiding her relationship. And then, when she found herself with an unplanned pregnancy, the lies and hiding continued out of fear that the previous lies would be discovered. She was afraid. And even being pro-life, she felt that having an abortion would make everything go away, and that her fear of being discovered would disappear as well. But as Brittany pointed out, what's done in darkness always gets brought out into the light. And while she feared an angry response, her mother, though hurt, responded with love for her daughter. Brittany ended up suffering through this fear in silence for years. She continued being bombarded with lies until she made another difficult decision. The decision to seek help. That help led to hope, healing, forgiveness, and grace. And it also led her down a path that now allows her to offer hope and healing to others. Please take advantage of the resources available on Brittany's website and listen to her podcast. You don't have to have had an abortion to benefit from these resources. And maybe you can be the person that makes that bridge to offer hope and healing to someone else who needs it. Brittany did not feel like she had resources or any other options at the time of her unplanned pregnancy. But she wants you to know that help, hope, and healing are available. And that question we asked at the beginning of the episode, the name of her podcast, Does God Forgive Abortion? Yes. Yes, he does. Is there anything in your past that you've been hiding? Maybe something you think God would never forgive? Who can you talk to about reconciliation? It may just be the hope and healing you didn't know you were seeking. Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.